Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism midweek specials. We are back after our summer holidays from the midweek show, where this is the show where we discuss things not just solely on Scottish independence, but as Scotland one day goes into the big world, we should be paying attention to what's happening out there. And as it's been the case for almost 2 years now, in fact more than 2 years, the biggest things going is the special military operation in Ukraine and I'm going to call it what it is, the genocide in Gaza. We don't feel you're getting the proper information on either, but we're really going to concentrate mainly on what's happening in Palestine and the Middle East in general. Now, Craig Murray was meant to be joining us as well, but unfortunately, due to circumstances we don't know, he has been unable to join us. If he does make it along later, we will bring him in, but in the meantime, unfortunately, Craig is not with us, but hopefully we'll get him on the show again very, very soon. But I am delighted, of course, to welcome Lloyd, who always assists me in these Wednesday shows. Mr. Conan, how are you?
I'm well, Roddy. I'm well. Sorry, Craig's not here, but I hope he turns up before we're finished. That would be good.
Yeah, but not to worry, folks. We have a superstar to join us anyway. We have a citizen Tommy himself, Mr. Tommy Sheridan. Tommy, welcome.
Hi, Roddy. Hi, Lloyd. Thanks for the invitation. Like Lloyd, it's a pity that Craig hasn't been able to join us. Hopefully he can join us during the show. He's got a wealth of information and experience, but I think he's in Greece trying to get into Palestine as we speak, so it may be that something's happened in that front, Roddy, but I'm sure Lloyd and I and yourself will be able to talk about this subject matter in a way that I think Craig would endorse and would concur with.
Yeah, we'll muddle through, I'm sure, Tommy. We'll muddle through. I want to concentrate on Palestine because next week, ladies and gentlemen, I will be doing a show on the special military operation. I have a citizen of Mariupol in the Donbass who will be joining me, and I look forward to that. But I want to play a video that kind of sums up what's going on with the British government, and this is just sums up what's wrong with our society. We've taken away the winter fuel payment. We've got austerity going on. We've got jobs getting cut off, price rising. They tell us we've got no money. However, there's always money for bombs and guns.
Conference, in my second day in this job, I travelled to Ukraine and spent the afternoon with President Zelensky, visiting injured soldiers. They told us about the daily attacks, the destroyed homes, the dead friends. They told us that they were fighting for their country's freedom and they were fighting for Europe's future. Because defence of Europe, defence of the UK starts in Ukraine. And today is day 942 of Putin's illegal war. And I'm proud Labour has stood with Kyiv from day one. I'm proud the UK is united for Ukraine, and I'm proud this Labour government has stepped up our support for Ukraine. New packages of artillery, air defence, armoured vehicles, a new guarantee to speed up deliveries, a new defence industrial strategy, a treaty with new export guarantees, a new commitment to train Ukrainian troops throughout 2025, and a pledge to spend £3 billion in military support for Ukraine this year, next year, and for every year it takes, for as long as it takes for Ukraine to win.
The reason I played that, Tommy, is the hypocrisy and double standards. As I alluded to, they can't pay the pensioners decent stuff, but they can find $3 billion this year and every year, which is double what you would need for the winter fuel allowance, for example. Or $3 billion, you could give a wee bit of a pay rise to the pensioners, or go somewhere decent. But it was the fact that he's saying it's day 942 of the illegal war. My maths isn't great, Tommy, but tell me what 75 years time days of the illegal occupation and war in Palestine, where they don't care, where they're proud of the defence of the Ukrainians, but they've got no sympathy for the Palestinians who are trying to get rid of the occupiers. The hypocrisy is nauseating, Tommy.
Roddy, it's rancid. It is the stench of excrement. This hypocrisy that somehow or other we should all be behind Ukraine, who for the best part of 8 years were attacking militarily the Donbass region, this Russian-speaking region of Ukraine. 14,000 civilians died in the course of that 8-year bombardment, and then had troops massing on the border with Russia. And you know, if Pope Francis has got the balls and the courage to say that Russia was provoked to take action to defend their sovereignty, then why the hell do we have no Western politicians with the balls to stand up and say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not with the Nazi Azov regimes in Ukraine. I don't support funding the Nazis. I think Russia has been lied to, Russia has been intimidated, and Russia has been provoked. That doesn't make you a puppet of Putin. What it makes you is a tribune of truth, because that's what's happened. They have been lied to. NATO is the most aggressive militaristic body on our planet, responsible for more wars, more killings, more bombings than any other nation, obviously, run by America. And from that point of view, I think we have a duty to say, no, I'm not going with your narrative. Your narrative's pish. It's complete and utter lies. I'm not prepared to accept it. And at the same time, defend Ukraine. They've been invaded. 75 years of occupation of Palestine. The recent invasion that started after October 7th. Why are we not supplying missiles to Palestine? Why are we not supplying troops to Palestine? Why are we not attacking Israel on the basis of defending Palestine's sovereignty? That's the rancid hypocrisy that runs like the ink through a stick of rock. It just runs through Western society just now, Roddy. I think, I don't know what you would agree with. I'm now 60 years of age. I think you guys are slightly older than me. I have never lived in a more unstable international situation in my life. I spoke to Hugh Kerr earlier the day, and he said, Tommy, Cuban Missile Crisis of 62 was more unstable because we came within hours of a possible nuclear war. I think we're there now. I think we are near a nuclear war, because if the long-range missiles are used in Ukraine against Moscow, what do you expect Putin to do? What do you expect Russia to do? If they don't then retaliate and attack Germany and France and Britain, then everybody will think, oh, well, Russia's not going to do it, let's just keep attacking them. So, personally, if those long-range missiles are used, then I think the game's a bogey. I think you're looking at a strategic nuclear war in the next few days or weeks.
I certainly hope not, but it's a worry. It's definitely a concern. I'm delighted, folks, to say that Craig has now joined us, and I'll bring him right in right away and put you right in the hotspot, Craig. What was your opinion of that? No, let me give you the question. I put up a video there of the new Defence Secretary talking about how the UK is defending the brave people of Ukraine, that they will give them $3 billion this year and every year. And did we know it was 942 days of this wonderful defence? And my question to Tommy was simply this: why is no one talking up for the 75 years times 300 of days that the Palestinians have been getting slaughtered and murdered, and we don't send them any help? We're not proud to help them, and we're not proud of their defence. They're terrorists. It's just double standards and terrible hypocrisy.
Well, that's what it is. I mean, it is hypocrisy, and obviously both situations are extremely dangerous, but the situation in Ukraine and in Eastern Europe is probably slightly more dangerous in terms of the chances of provoking imminent nuclear war. And it's unwinnable. What I've been saying about Ukraine for the last couple of years, and it remains true, is there is no way to victory for Ukraine that does not involve inflicting levels of damage on Russia itself, not locally within Ukraine, but on Russia itself, would be bound to provoke nuclear war. But it would be impossible for Russia to sustain without eventually reaching for nuclear retaliation. But you can't achieve the local levels of superiority you would need to break through Russian lines and recapture Ukrainian territory locally. That's why they are desperate to start striking into Russia. And obviously, a situation where NATO are piling weapons into Ukraine. And of course, in modern warfare, people are not so important. Modern warfare is not won by artillerymen walking around with automatic rifles. Modern warfare is highly automated and won by big missiles. And if you're pounding Russia with NATO missiles, it's not really a proxy war anymore. It's NATO fighting Russia, and that is the path to World War III and the path to global extinction. So the entire strategy is deeply irresponsible, and there is no other strategy. They have nothing else. What is needed is a serious attempt to negotiate a solution and negotiate a settlement. I saw today, I think the Czech, today or yesterday, the Czech Prime Minister came out and said that Ukraine has to be realistic about the fact it has to give up some territory. And that's true, that there's no other way out of this that doesn't involve everyone, including all of us, dying. So the grossly irresponsible and madly jingoistic policy of just throwing in unlimited weapons and unlimited resources, which we don't have. We don't have enough money in this country. We're cutting all kinds of vital services. It's utterly crazy.
Yeah. Here's the thing, Lloyd. I mean, it's the lies that are going with it all, and the hypocrisy, as we've mentioned. You know, the narrative getting put out by the Western politicians, media, commentators, is that in February 22, Putin just woke up and marched into Ukraine because he felt like it, and that all the problems in Palestine and Gaza are because of Hamas and October the 7th. No one's going back to the Nakba in 1948. No one's going back to the Maidan coup in 2014 or the burning of the people in the Trades House. And as Tommy alluded to, the 15,000 civilians that have been killed by the Nazi militia.
Yeah, but these things will not be mentioned. But I think it's interesting that given that the current British Defence Minister is probably the greatest within the Labour Party, the greatest cheerleader for Likud and Netanyahu and the Israeli regime, you know, I think what we heard today is to take our focus away from what's happening in Gaza and in Lebanon. I think the Labour Party are moving directly to shifting us further and further back to examining the Ukraine, to keep our minds and our eyes off what Israel is up to. And this is the direct interference of the Zionist lobby. I mean, as I look at the cabinet, the British government cabinet at the moment, and I go through each and every one of them, to my knowledge, there is not a single member of the cabinet who is not a member of Labour Friends of Israel. And if that's not a greater statement than the position of the British government, a position not supported by the population, I also find it extraordinary that I have to listen to this man who was okay, he's been a member of parliament for a period of time, but he has suddenly turned into a military expert. He uses words like win and victory. in the context of Russia and the Ukraine, if he understood anything about military history, if he understood anything about the prosecution of war, he would understand fully that it is entirely and completely impossible for the Ukraine to defeat the Russian Federation without the involvement of a third party or more than a third party. It's an absurdity. But the thing about it here is that, you know, as in the early 2000s, when Blair and Brown and the Labour Party took us into an illegal war in Iraq against the wishes of the people, we're again here in the same situation where the support for the war in Ukraine is not supported genuinely by the mass of the people, but more importantly, and this is the real issue, if we are focused on Ukraine, we are not paying attention to the war crimes and the genocidal behaviour of Israel. We're not paying attention to the destruction of the lives of civilians in southern Lebanon, in Gaza and in the West Bank. And I think that is directly the operation that the current Defence Minister of the British government is carrying out, is to make us focus elsewhere, because he doesn't want the focus on his good friends in the Knesset and in Netanyahu's government.
It's a fair point, Tommy, isn't it, that they're trying to divert us, because there are no red lines, it seems, for the Israeli regime. I mean, last week we had the pagers and the radios injuring 4,000 people and killing 30. The white phosphorus being dropped in the Lebanon. And I've heard the latest figures in Lebanon from the bomb, something like there's 356 dead, 1,246 wounded civilians. They're again attacking civilians. They're not attacking military targets. And they tried to say, as one of their excuses, Tommy, that the Hezbollah were firing cruise missiles out of a house in Beirut. Now, none of us here are military, but to put you can't fire a cruise missile out of a house, you know, right out the window. But no one in the media pulls them up. No one says, wait a minute, that's not possible. That can't be true. No one says anything about the white phosphorus, which is a war crime. What red line is there, Tommy? Is there one?
The organisation Media Lens does a splendid job, and I would recommend it to all the viewers if they don't already follow Media Lens, then they should do, because they analyse the propaganda and the narrative of they don't call it the mainstream media, and neither should we. We should call it the corrupt and corporate media rather than mainstream, because there's nothing mainstream about them. They're very extreme, right-wing extreme is what the corporate media is. And they give an example, a compare and contrast today, Roddy, which I think was an excellent example. Because in 1982, when the IRA blew up the bandstand that held the regiment, I think it was the Green Beret Regiment, and they killed, I think, 30 soldiers and injured hundreds of others. It was condemned absolutely and wildly by the media as a disgraceful, despicable terrorist act. When Hezbollah are apparently targeted by Israel blowing up pagers, walkie-talkies, killing and maiming innocent men, women and children, you've got Bowen on the BBC talking about it being a tactical genius and a fantastic result, a bit like a James Bond movie. And therein lies the difference. When someone in the West has been attacked, it's terrorism. When someone indiscriminately kills civilians and children, it's, that's a remarkable bit of genius from the Israeli Defence Force. It is sickening. I nearly swore there, Roddy. It is sickening to the core to look at the different reporting. I mean, you get the BBC saying X amount of people were killed in Lebanon today. Who killed them? What happened? Who killed these people in Lebanon? Instead of saying Israel killed, and by the way, the figure now is up near 500, Roddy, 492, I think that they're saying, with 1,800 injured from the bombings over the last couple of days. So This is an absolutely unprecedented situation, and we in the West are not even condemning it. We're not even condemning, never mind them occupying and attacking Gaza and the West Bank. They're now attacking another sovereign bloody country. And we in the West are refusing to condemn it. And that's why, and I hate this, to say this in a forum like this, because I think all of us on the left and people of a progressive mind, we should all abhor war. War is horrible because innocent people inevitably get killed. That's what happens in war. But I'm telling you, Roddy, I'm now at the stage in my life where I can't stand it any longer after viewing what's happened over this last 8 months, 9 months. I just will Iran, Turkey, Syria, Iraq to get involved. Militarily, Israel has to be attacked now. Militarily, Israel has to be stopped. I wasn't there, I wasn't around at the time, but when did people of the progressive wing of politics decide that Hitler had to be militarily opposed? Because that's where we are now. Netanyahu has to be militarily opposed. Israel has to be attacked. And as far as I'm concerned, I know innocent lives will be killed in that. I know that. But I'm sorry, there's already 20,000 innocent kids have been killed, 40,000 in total, unarmed civilians slaughtered by these animals, these evil, malevolent animals. And therefore, from my point of view, I'm sorry, I support attacking Israel militarily. By the way, just to bring you up to date, I don't know if you've seen it, but Erdogan, Turkish Premier, I've got no light for him, but he spoke at the UN a matter of an hour or so ago, and he's now calling for a humanitarian armed assault on Israel. So it's not just us individuals calling for Israel to be militarily attacked. You now get presidents of countries with a significant military force. I just wish they would turn their words into action.
Yeah, the problem I found with Erdogan is he talks the talk, he never walks the walk.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the problem with him. Here's the thing, Craig, that got me. Within a few weeks of the Russian special military operation, the ICG and the ICC had condemned Putin, they issued warrants. Now they've come out and they've said that there's war crimes being committed in Palestine, that Netanyahu and Gallant and others are responsible and they should face justice. But no warrants have been issued. FIFA haven't banned Israel. UEFA haven't banned Israel. The Olympic Committee haven't banned Israel. Again, I go back to the theme here. The double standards are quite appalling.
Yeah, it is an appalling double standard, and we must remember it's not only a bias in favour of Israel, which it most certainly is, and we must always remember that among the political and media class, that bias is basically paid for. That's how it's done. You know, the politicians are in their pockets. They've received so much money, including people like Starmer and Rachel Reeves and David Lammy. They've all received so much cash from a lobby. They can't go backwards. They're utterly compromised. And you'll find that's true in UEFA and in other places as well. You know, people are getting backhanders. That's why they support Israel. But also there's anti-Arab racism and Islamophobia in there as well. That's also a very, very important part of the mix. And there's one nuance here, which I think people aren't fully aware of, which is that in attacking Lebanon, Netanyahu is playing into the pro-Saudi Salafist network as well. I'm afraid to say that it is true that the ruling caste in the majority of Arab states in the region are Salafist Sunni Islam sectarian bigots, really. This is a form of sectarianism which is even more virulent than the kind of sectarianism we know of in Scotland or in Northern Ireland. The hatred of Sunnis for Shias is something which is the most, you know, I've met racists, I've met white supremacists, I've met genuine anti-Semites, and I've seen religious bigotry. I've never experienced the kind of virulent prejudice you see, particularly, I mean, Shias against Sunnis to some extent, but particularly Sunnis against Shias. And there are a remarkable number of Arab people who are superficially pro-Palestine, who are actually cheering on the Israelis against Hezbollah because Hezbollah is Shia. And that's sadly true. And it's also why, of course, when Iran, when the Houthis, when Hezbollah fire rockets at Israel, you have countries like Jordan and the UAE and Saudi Arabia actually knocking down missiles on behalf of Israel and fighting alongside Israel. And when we look in horror, yes, most of the Arab countries, states have corrupt regimes which have very close financial ties to Western capitalism and very close security ties to Western and Israeli security services that help keep those corrupt regimes in power. And that's an important part of the nexus of why they never do anything for the Palestinians. But also, there's the fact that the West plays up and plays on this Sunni-Shia divide. And that's why, strangely enough, now that Israel is going to war, you might think that by extending the war so it's not only Gaza, because Hamas are not Shia, Hamas are Sunni, even though they're Iranian linked in some ways. By extending the war from Gaza to Lebanon, you may think that would cause even further outrage in the Arab world. And actually, among Arab regimes, it doesn't. It actually pulls in some Arab nations, some Arab ruling classes on Netanyahu's side because he's now attacking an openly Shia force. And I think that's something people don't sufficiently understand. I just wanted to get that in there.
Interesting, but the thing is, it was Niemöller said it, Lloyd. First they came for the communists, and I said nothing. Surely these Arab leaders must realise, if they understand the Zionist project, that once they're finished with Gaza, occupying and finishing off their genocide and occupying all of Gaza and the whole of Palestine, they'll be after them next. Who will it be? Jordan, Syria, Lebanon? They've not stopped at that.
Yeah, indeed. But as Craig said, the collaboration of particular regimes in the Middle East, particularly those regimes that were close to the British or close to the French in the past, the collaboration between them and Israel is quite extraordinary. I mean, there have been many statements of why this situation exists. Now, my interpretation of it is, if you educate your ruling class at Oxford, Cambridge, and the military academy at Sandhurst, then they will come out the other end of that with a very, very clear and specific mindset and a set of agreed values around the world. So there's that on one side. On the other side of it is this: there is amongst the Arab ruling class, particularly those connected to the West, an utter and complete fear of their own people. The Saudi regime fears its own people. The Jordanians, the Jordanian king fears his own people. Qatar fears its own people, and this is in some ways it cuts to the heart of what you're talking about, Roddy. Is that yes, a day of reckoning will come, but for people who know they have a day of reckoning coming, they tend to hide away from that idea. They ignore it. They put it in a cupboard. They put it behind a book on the bookshelf, and they don't address it, like Batista in Cuba, but to some degree Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Yes, these regimes will come to an end. I just find it absolutely extraordinary that for many people, the belief is that these regimes allow themselves to be effectively controlled and manipulated by Israel because of their fear of the threat of Israeli nuclear weapons. One of the other things which is seldom brought into the discussion is just how much does that. It was talked about in the 70s and the 80s to some degree, and particularly around the time when Mordechai Vanunu was spirited out of Italy by Mossad, there was a discussion about why is there a level of fear, particularly with the Egyptians, with the Jordanians, and with the Saudis. And the statement was made very clearly then that was because Israel threatened that in the event that these countries turned on Israel, then Israel would use its nuclear weapons against them. Now, we've had no clear statement of whether that's true or false, but what is clear to anybody looking at this is the Arab ruling class are not on the side of the Arab working class, and they most certainly are not on the side of the Palestinian people. And in some ways, for us, even us, to allow this to be dragged into a religious ethno-conflict, when in reality, Palestinians have an ethnicity up to a point. They have a number of different religions. They're a people, they're a nation with a culture, a language completely and utterly of their own. And it plays to the enemies of Palestine and the enemies of the Arab people for us to allow ourselves, while illuminating the fact that religious sectarianism is an element in this, it's not the central issue in the same way as Islamophobia is not the central issue. Any of the attitudes towards Arabs in the Islamic world are to effectively create division that serves us in no way positively and serves them in no way positively at all. And it simply serves the status quo as it stands at present.
Here's the thing, Tommy. Everything in the West, in the Western world, in the Anglosphere in particular, I think all the problems are greed. And they think that money can fix everything, and money is everything. And so they're throwing all this money at Ukraine, and they're throwing all the money to Israel, thinking that will fix the problem. When in fact, it's not money that will fix these problems. It's talking, compromise, human decency. Surely that's the way forward.
Yeah, I do think it's the way forward, Roddy, but I'm afraid it's not the immediate way forward, because there is no prospect, in my opinion, that Israel will be brought to any table to negotiate, to compromise, until they're militarily weakened, severely weakened, and perhaps even wiped out. I think the bigger picture here, in my opinion, I think Israel's finished. People say, "Oh, what are you talking about? They've just demolished Palestine. They're now demolishing Lebanon. They've been firing missiles into Syria. How can you say they're finished?" I think they're finished because it's a bit like the Wizard of Oz being exposed. They are now exposed across the world as the source of malevolence in the Middle East, of which only political activists used to talk about. We've known what Israel's like for many decades, but most people were busy with other things in their lives, and, well, there's two sides to every story. I think Israel now is seen by anyone with a twin set of brain cells and at least one beating heart that they are the cause of murder and mayhem, slaughter. I mean, you look at one wee incident, Roddy, which I think sums up Israeli society. I don't know if it hit you guys as much. I'm sure it did. But they bomb and slaughter innocent children, civilians. Then countries bring in aid trucks. And the civilian population of Israel blocks the aid trucks and destroys the aid. Now, what type of subhuman evil person do you have to be to say, I'm going to destroy the aid to kids who have lost limbs so that they don't get medicine, food, water? Kids are starving, and these people are preventing aid getting to them. So from my point of view, Roddy, I think Israel is now standing exposed as the absolute bastard, illegitimate, evil nation, the cancer across society. Everything that is wrong with humanity is epitomized by Israel. And I don't think it can last. I personally, for years we used to hear about the two-state solution. There is no longer anybody with any semblance of legitimacy talking about a two-state solution. It's now a one-state solution, and whether you call it Palestine or whether you call it the Holy Land, it's going to be one state. It's got to be one state. That means Israel no longer, I think, can exist. Now, whether that's in months or years, personally, I think that's the bigger picture here, Roddy.
Yeah, I've had guests on here before who said that the two-state solution is long gone. Can't work. You're right, absolutely. One state seems to be the way forward. Craig, you're our official diplomat. I mean, you were Mr. Ambassador, and you didn't even bring me any Ferrier Rocher here tonight, which was rather disappointing. But as a diplomat, do you see any diplomatic solution in the short or long term?
No, I don't think there's any diplomatic solution. I agree 100% that there is no two-state solution. The two-state solution, which the Western world claims to believe in, is exactly the same as the solution that was meant to be the end goal of South African apartheid, where you had the white state and then you had split up little Bantustans said to be independent states, which would supply a labor pool of cheap working class labor to be exploited by the white people, who'd be allowed in on a daily basis to work, then put back in their homelands again. That's exactly what the blueprint is of the so-called two-state solution. Plainly, the state they envisage for Palestine is not a state at all. It's several entirely separated little land parcels hemmed in by massive fences, razor wire, huge concrete walls, with very limited access and connection between them, with Israeli control of the water supplies, demilitarized. But they are slave labor camps. That's what the two-state solution is designed to be. It's designed to be Israel and Palestinian slave labor camps. So I agree 100% with Tommy that there is no two-state solution. And as the Western so-called diplomatic efforts were all aimed at reaching this kind of two-state solution agreement, that's now dead. I mean, no one's going to agree to that. Maybe the Vichy Palestinian Authority might still agree to that, but nobody. One thing which has totally disappeared as a result of this is the authority of the Palestinian Authority, Abbas and his people, who did have some residual support before the current accelerated phase of genocide. That's now completely gone. They now have almost no support whatsoever among Palestinian people, even in the West Bank. So there's nobody to negotiate with. There's no solution in sight. And sadly, this has to be essentially effectively a military solution, or a solution brought about in part. I mean, yes, the military phase is very important, but we also have to see the kind of delegitimizing of Israel that we saw with South Africa, where sanctions and disapproval became so universal, it became impossible for white South Africa, apartheid South Africa, to continue to operate. And we have to move very quickly towards that. I would say that the other thing, which is very important in terms of diplomatic processes, is the ICJ judgment on the status of the occupied territories, the advisory opinion it gave the General Assembly, which the General Assembly then voted to implement. Because that specifically rules out the Oslo Accords as limiting Palestinian rights. Because the position of the United Kingdom is still that the Palestinians no longer have, all their rights to self-determination, all their rights to restore their property was signed away in the Oslo Accords. And what the ICJ have said is essentially, no, before any negotiation, before any discussions, Israel has to leave the occupied territories first, because somebody cannot negotiate while a gun is being held to their head. So the Oslo Accords no longer have any status after the ICJ agreement. And that's an important breakthrough, because the Oslo Accords were the apartheid two-state solution dead end. And the ICJ have got rid of that. And the world has rejected that. 148 countries in the world voted to accept the ICJ ruling, and 14 countries voted against. The UK disgracefully abstained. But the two-state solution is dead and buried. In the short term, there's certainly no diplomatic solution. And I agree that Israel's new pariah status has to be reinforced, but that has to be done by the people. It's up to the people in every state to enforce that on their governments and to stand up to the paid Zionist puppets who form governments in Western countries and say, we will not stand to this. And that's up to us. We are the people in our state in this way. We have to revolt against the disgusting attitudes of the Labour friends of Israel who run the United Kingdom.
No, I agree. I mean, one thing we didn't do when we started this programme, Lloyd, was say, as happens on BBC and ITV Channel 4, do you condemn October the 7th, which is usually the opening question that everyone gets when this is discussed in the corporate media. There, Tommy, I didn't use the word mainstream. There you go. The corporate media. But the thing is, where is, as Craig's alluded to, where are the sanctions from the UN? The ICJ and the ICC have said that war crimes have been committed. The UN's voted, 148 voted for, but there's no sanctions. How can this possibly continue, Lloyd?
I wish you hadn't asked me this question, Roddy, because this is the thing that hangs around the back of my mind. We constantly talk about international law. We think there are, and we wish there to be international standards. Yes, there is international law, but it's ignored. This is the hard bit. This is the really difficult bit, when you have to face up to the fact that Israel, the United States, NATO, and the United Kingdom are so rogue in their behaviour that they can effectively allow international law to kind of rot on the vine, as it were. And this appears to be the circumstance that we're in. Now, how do we look at that? Do we look at it from the other point of view, which is this? Is the Israeli lobby so powerful that effectively it has killed the power of international law, of the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court? Is that where we are? Is this the position in history we're at? Because that's a ground zero that I would very much not like to be part of, knowing that my daughter will grow up into a world where there is no international law, where the United Nations has no power whatsoever. Is this where we want to be? Because if that's where we want to be, then we shouldn't be seeking the independence of our country. What would be the point? We'd be as well just staying within the United Kingdom. If there is no such thing anymore as international law when it comes to the destruction of civilian society, when it comes to effective genocide, then are we not in a darker place now than we were in May 1945? Is that the nature of where we're at? And as I said,
I don't think it's rhetorical.
I wish you hadn't asked me this question, because it leads to a very, very dark, potentially very, very dark place. And I, for one, I'm not that bright. I can't see a way out of this other than from my own positive feelings about the nature of humanity.
No, I hope you're right.
If
It
I
does,
could jump in, because I don't think it was rhetorical. That question that Lloyd was posing there, I think, is a very, very serious and a very urgent question. And the truth is, he's right. The international law is now as useful as a chocolate teapot. International law has got no authority, because we now have black and white, as you said, within a matter of weeks. International law was used to sanction and isolate Russia for a special military operation, despite the clear provocation that they came under to cause that special military operation. But after 8-9 months of literal slaughter, 20,000 children literally slaughtered. The reports from the United Nations rapporteurs call it extermination of children. After that, there's no sanctions. There's no arrest warrant. There's no international humanitarian movement from the UN to actually bring these animals to Brook. So what is international law? It doesn't exist in that respect. For me, we are witnessing, I think, in real time, we are witnessing the birth of a new international order. I think the current international order is decaying before our eyes because America, as the boss, as the chief of international affairs, is disappearing. They are being undermined. They are no longer the power that they once thought they were. I think the BRICS movement, particularly key to that is the role of China. I think the fact that Russia now has an alliance with China means that they have much more leverage across the world. The development of a new currency to trade in the world, I think anybody in America with half a brain cell must say to themselves, they're talking about moving away from the dollar as the chief currency across the world. Once they do that, and they're on the eve of it, America's power will completely and utterly collapse. So I think my answer, Lloyd, is I think we're witnessing a new world order. Whether it's born later this year, next year, or the year after, it's being born. And maybe it's a difficult birth. A lot of births are difficult, but a new international order's been born.
Well, I hope you're right, and I do agree with you. I tend to agree with you that BRICS and the global south are beginning to flex their muscles, and what's actually happening with Russia, Brazil, China, and all is that it's giving courage and to the southern nations who have been, suffered colonization for centuries. Craig, I'm believe in simplicity. And I'm a great believer that life is very simple. Relationships are very simple. Business is very simple. It's people that make it difficult. And the reality is, in my humble opinion, is that if Joe Biden was to pick up the phone today and make 2 phone calls, one to Kiev and one to Tel Aviv, and said, it stops now, it would stop. It really is that simple. But there's no desire for him to pick up that phone.
Yeah, someone might have to remind him what the phone is for, because he probably thinks it's a peanut machine or something. He's not really in a very good place to pick up anyone's phone and say anything cogent to anybody. But the simple truth is that Joe Biden has received more money from the Israeli lobby, more cash, simple cash, in the course of his career than any other American politician, possibly even any politician in the world. And of course, the other truth is that he and his family received huge amounts of black money from Ukraine as well, and they, that's why he's where he is on both those things. You're right to say life is often simple, and I think people forget how crude and how simple the cash paid to politicians angle is. It is that simple. They're just bought. On this question of where things stand, I mean, Tom's absolutely right, and obviously we are on the cusp of China becoming the most powerful country in the world, as opposed to the United States becoming the most powerful country in the world. Potentially, that's already true, but China doesn't choose to use its influence and its potential in the aggressive way that the United States does, and there'll be a kind of strange settling period, I guess, this next couple of decades. It's been fascinating being. I was at the United Nations in Geneva again last week, and I've spent quite a lot of time there this last year talking with senior UN officials. And the thing you have to remember, of course, that the United States, because it was set up in the post-1945 period, the United Nations is an institution of which the largest contributor to the budget is the United States. And the United Kingdom is close to being the next largest contributor to the budget. And it's been really interesting watching the United Nations officials, and we shouldn't idealize the United Nations, and we shouldn't idealize the people who work within it, because to get to work in the UN, your appointment has to be put forward at any level and agreed to by your host government. So these are members of the same corrupt political class that run states. They're not angels by any means. And the reluctance of the United Nations to bite the hand that feeds it has been very, very telling. And yet people do, to some extent, get captured by and believe in something of the things they're meant to be fighting for. And so there's been this tension where UN officials very, very reluctant to criticize Israel, very, very, very reluctant to go against the United States, because that's where their salaries come from at the end of the day. But feel I should. I went to, back in December, I think, I went to a United Nations memorial ceremony for United Nations workers who had been killed in Gaza. And at that time, it was about 80. It's about 200 now, I think. At that time, it was about 80. And the United Nations, the top brass of the United Nations, including the Secretary General, made little speeches, and not one of them dare say who actually killed the workers. There's no mention of who killed them. They just died. They got killed, in a passive sense. So this collapse of international law is very real. And the ICJ has actually been extremely good throughout this, but their ability to enforce their judgments is, of course, very limited and is dependent on nation states to enforce them. The ICC is an organization which I've always felt is very corrupt, and their desire, in a situation where we know that Hamas killed a few hundred people. The majority of people killed on October 7th were killed by the Israelis, but as a result of an action taken by Hamas, I accept. But Hamas killed a few hundred people, whereas the Israelis have killed 40,000, and the far higher proportion of the people killed by the Israelis have been women and children than of the people that Hamas killed. And yet the ICC is only working on the basis of an equivalent number of warrants for both sides, when there are many thousands of Israeli war criminals who have been involved in terrible war crimes in Gaza. Thousands of people should be indicted. And yet the ICC, for reasons of political correctness, which are nothing whatsoever to do with the administration of justice, are looking at maybe 3 Israelis and 3 Hamas to keep some sort of political balance, which ought to be totally irrelevant if justice and prosecuting war crimes is the question. So the ICC, I'm afraid, is a deeply compromised institution. Whether international law can recover is a question. I mean, I don't disagree with anything Tommy said, but whether or not, as the world rebalances, whether the Russians and the Chinese haven't seen interest in reconstituting and reinvigorating the instruments of international law is a possibility. I don't actually rule it out. I think the Chinese, in particular, have a great deal of wisdom. So we may see, this may be a phase, and we may get back to international law. I'm not willing to rule out the concept of international law forever.
I owe myself a quid. Yeah, I forgot. The dog next door is going mental. That's why I put it on mute. There's no doubt whatsoever. We've seen it with our own eyes because of, God bless the internet, which they're trying to sanction and fix so that we don't see it. But we know, without a shadow of a doubt, there's a genocide going on. We know that there's 40,000 at least, and there's maybe the same again, Tommy, under the rubble. We don't know that has not been found yet. We know this. Everybody knows it. And yet Netanyahu goes to the United States of America and he gets, 50 standing ovations in the both houses. It is quite disgusting. We all know it.
It was utterly moronic.
And they do it. Is there a chance, do you think, Lloyd, that there could be a breakaway United Nations, China, BRICS, and the Southern, the global, moving away and saying to the Anglosphere and to Western Europe, you do your own thing and we're going to do our thing. Is that a possibility?
Even if I had an opinion about it, it wouldn't really count for anything, Roddy. I mean, I think the way things a formalised structure, I can't imagine it. I genuinely can't. We have sub-organisations of the United Nations, Southeast Asian Cooperation, Organisation of African States, Organisation of South American States. No, I don't really see that. But what I do see is the possibility of people basically doing it, states and countries and groups of states and countries doing their own thing, much as what's going on at the moment, but in a slightly different way. I do believe we're in a period of change, but we're always in a period of change. It's one of the, it's the glibest thing you can possibly say is we're in a period of change. I can't see a formalised structure, but I've already said that already. I think that how the situation with BRICS develops and emerges, I think will obviously have knock-on effects for the United Nations, for the European Union, for a number of, shall we say, treaties across the world. Now, whether or not, as a development within the BRICS structure, you would find some manner or means to put forward, maybe minimum agreements on human rights, in some ways taking on board some of the issues from the Council of Europe or some of the things that we feel the United Nations is failing in, I think is possible. But I don't think any of these issues are really at the top of the tree for those who are considering the formalisation of the BRICS structure. And as I think, as Craig said earlier on, I think we all should pay a lot of attention to the long-term thinking and wisdom of the Chinese in a circumstance like this, because as you alluded to as well, Roddy, the fact that Chinese influence has grown apace in the past 20 years particularly, with little or no fanfare, no shouting and bawling. But I saw something very interesting the other day where a senior minister in an African government pointed out that they flew into their country in a Chinese aircraft onto a runway built by the Chinese, and then got on a train on a railway that was built by the Chinese. And from that railway, she got into a car that was made in China, built in China. And all of the time she hadn't actually left the continent of Africa. China's having a big effect across the world, particularly in Africa, and it seems to be a positive one. Maybe from that we might see the creation of something that would replace the United Nations, but I cannot see it at this stage. But then I'm quite old and stupid.
You're old. I'm the old codger on the show here. Tommy, we're coming towards the end of today's podcast, but I'd like to get something, anything positive. Do you see anything positive on these two horrible conflicts that are going on in the world just now?
No, I'm sorry, Roddy. I always like to be positive in my outlook. I think it's important for our own mental health that we always try and remain positive. But I see a lot more pain before there's anything positive. Personally, as far as Palestine and Israel is concerned, there just simply has to be a military intervention. There has to be an alliance of humanity that takes up arms against the evil which Israel represents right now. And I keep hearing people saying, "Oh, but Tommy, that's just what Israel want. They want to embroil other Middle East countries in a wider conflagration of war so that America will be forced to help them." And I say to that, all right, okay, so what we do is we just keep letting Israel do whatever they want. When somebody starts punching people in the playground, after they've punched the first two or three, somebody's got to stand up with a bully. And sometimes standing up with that bully means you need to punch them back. And I'm sorry, that means the loss of life. And it's so glib for us to talk about it. We're in our comfortable homes talking about the loss of life. But people went and gave up their lives to fight Franco in 1936 because they thought it was the right thing to do. People gave up their lives to fight in the Second World War because they thought it was the right thing to do. People I think, are now concluding that Israel is the single biggest, it's not the single biggest source of conflict in the world, because America is the single biggest source of conflict in the world, but Israel is the evil epitome of what America represents. And therefore, I think there needs to be a military response in the whole situation with Ukraine, Roddy. We have to completely reject the absolute blanket of utter excrement that we're getting, manure that we're getting in the mainstream media. Oh, Ukraine's doing well and Ukraine's keeping it going. Ukraine is already defeated. Ukraine is done. All that Russia's doing now is getting the ducks in a row. They are slowly but surely making sure that they're making the progress along that Eastern Front. They are absolutely, in my opinion, and people will, I'm sure, try and prove me wrong, and I may be, but in my opinion, Russia are in control of what is happening as far as that conflict is concerned. The only hidden and unknown, which could be crucial here, is whether the West is lunatic enough to unleash the long-range missiles, because then Russia, in my opinion, with just cause, will be forced to retaliate, and that will then lead to further retaliation. I think the people of Germany, I mean, what has Germany become? You see the pictures the other day, you talked about the internet, Roddy, pictures the other day of the state police dressed like warriors chasing a 12-year-old boy for the crime of waving a bloody flag, a Palestinian flag. Absolute disgrace what that country has become. But the people within the country aren't like that, I don't think. I don't think the people of France, of Germany, of the UK, I don't think they support Israel. I think they support Palestine. I think the people across the world are with Palestine. But the governments across the world are reflecting what America's telling them to reflect. So I'm sorry, I can't be positive in the short term, Roddy, but I do think, and my final point is this, that anything I've read from both China and Russia about the BRICS organization is that they're looking to establish a new rules-based order. That's what, so it's not, they don't call it a new set of international laws, they call it a rules-based order. I think China is being strategic about what's going to happen in the future in the world. And personally, I'd rather go down the road of BRICS than what we've got just now, because I think the United Nations is corrupt before.
Yeah, Germany is in some state. I mean, Volkswagen going bust because of the sanctions they put against Russia. Is, you know, their economy is going. It is a bloody mess. Now, as I say, we're coming to the end. I'm hoping Craig's having some difficulties with his sound, and I'm hoping he's hearing me. Your closing remarks, Craig, if you can, if you've not lost you.
If you can hear me okay, can you give me a wave? Yeah, that's good. I've lost sound at this end. We've got a technical issue. These are really dark times. I think these are the most dangerous times I've lived through. I think this is more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis. In both Ukraine and in the Middle East, there's a chance of a war escalating that could very quickly and very easily blow up into a third world war. And the reason for that is the absolute, in both cases, it's the absolute reckless abandonment of the Western powers of common sense and this kind of strange supremacism that makes them think they can do what on earth they want and nobody can stop them and nobody's going to do anything about it. And this idea that they can humiliate Iran, they can humiliate Russia, they can even humiliate China, and ride roughshod over all principles of common decency. I mean, what's being done in Gaza and Lebanon is as disgusting as anything that's happened in my lifetime. And they seem to think they can simply get away with it and nobody will stand up to them. And they seem to be pushing and pushing in both Ukraine. You know, the idea of launching long-range missiles into Russia, the idea of putting more and more NATO hardware into Ukraine, the idea of expanding into a wider war in the Middle East that's bound to draw in Iran. All of this is brinkmanship of the highest order, and it is utter madness, and it's madness that risks incinerating us all. And I think these are very, very scary times, and times where the only way to counter it is for Western people to take control of their states away from the mad people who are currently in government. And that can be rather slowly through democratic processes. But in the UK, we should be doing it by splitting up the rogue state that is the United Kingdom. And one thing, we've been talking about international law, where international law stands. And when it comes to Scottish independence, the important thing is to establish facts on the ground. You know, we need a Scottish Parliament to simply declare independence. Then we need to take to the streets and take physical possession of our own country, because the international law is not terribly interested in your claims to independence if you don't actually control your territory. Control of your own territory is the most important thing. And we've always had fantastic reasons, genuine reasons, as a nation which wishes to exercise its right of self-determination and run the country in the way we want it to be run. Those are good enough reasons for Scottish independence anyway. But now the need to break up one of the main rogue states, which is at risk of destroying the world, makes it even more urgent.
Here, absolutely. Let's break it up, folks, and we'll deal with that on the weekend. The clock is beating us. I want to thank everyone for being here. You will notice, ladies and gentlemen, that 3 of us here are wearing glasses. Unlike the present Prime Minister, four of us have got wearing glasses. None of us had them bought for us. They didn't cost $2,500 each. You can also see by our attire, there is no Lord dressing us. Because, you know, if it is, it's a cheapskate Lord. What you see, here's what you get. And what you'll get is at the weekend when we return. Until then, you and yours, please, take care.
Cheers.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barney Boy.